Well, welcome to class, Marita. This is a tutorial one-on-one. We're getting some other students interested, but they have summer vacation or work or school plans, so they may have to join the course late. But since we're videotaping each class, that should be easy for them to catch up and join us, I hope. And then, so I'll have to hear back from them. In fact, I had an email in my box when I opened this. So what I thought I'd do today for our first class of 5 classes is just say a few words about William James, and feel free to interrupt at any time since you're the only student. No sense me prattling on if your mind is occupied with a question that you have. And then there are a lot of online resources for free. And one of them is the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. I know you have a huge Stanford connection going back decades in the medical field, at least, if not other fields. And so the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy is the best online encyclopedia of philosophy that I know of. And they have a William James entry, unsurprisingly, since he's a Hall.
Good. So I'll look that up.
Yeah, he's a Hall of Famer. And then Wikipedia, of course, has an entry for him too. It's not quite as good, but the interesting thing about the wiki sites is that there are 2 other wiki sites. There's wikiquote.org, and that is very useful because it has a link to another wiki source, which is wikisource.org. And wikisource.org has the entire Varieties of Religious Experience on it for free. And there are 20 lectures at the University of Edinburgh that he gave. It's published in 1902. And then the intermediate one I mentioned, wikiquote.org, that's the one I want to use today, and maybe use it at least partly in all of the classes, because we have been teaching more and more is to turn classes into workshops towards a paper. I don't know if you want to do a paper or not. I understand it's an option that's offered. And so I usually have my students build their term papers. In this case, the term's just 5 weeks, although there could be some time extra for people doing term papers. I'll have to look at the administrative rules when I have to turn the grades in. But since this is my first course for GMU in quite a while, did have one before, but it was quite a while ago. And the rules probably changed about it. So I thought we'd go over some quotes and just kind of react, sort of like an initial survey. You do an initial survey, and then you do a survey at the end of the course, maybe even talking about the same quotes or similar quotes, and see if you think differently about the quotes at the end of the course than you did at the beginning of the course. So that's my idea for what we would do today. And then, but feel free to, we can follow the questions where they lead as well. So he straddled, William, just say a few introductory words. So this work we're mainly going to focus on was published in 1902. And as I said, it's based on 20 lectures. He had an appointment at the University of Edinburgh, and he gave 20 lectures there and then published them all. So he straddles the centuries. He was born in 1842. And so that's the first half of the 19th century. And then he made it a bit into the 20th century. And the work we're focusing in on is from the 20th century. Trying to check out exactly when he died. I know he made it past 1910.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh yeah, he did die in 1910. So he made it past January 1st of 1910. So heart failure in his summer home in New Hampshire. I don't know how to pronounce it. Chocorua. I haven't been there. In fact, I did go to New Hampshire one time on a bus tour down from Canada to Philadelphia, and our bus broke down in Vermont. So that was quite an experience. So a pretty country up there. So no wonder he had a nice summer home there. And the Harvard connection is strong. He was trained as a physician, but he did not practice as a physician, although he did teach anatomy at Harvard. So he has a medical connection too. So he straddles interdisciplinary fields, and he straddles the centuries, and he straddles religion and science. He has a strong interest in both. So so I kind of identify with him because I kind of a straddler myself. I have a law degree and JD from Cornell Law School, and then I have a PhD from Cornell University in philosophy. So I have kind of a foot in each of two different fields too. But I did practice law, unlike James, who did not practice medicine, but teaching anatomy at Harvard sounds like quite a challenge. Well, I did manage to teach one course at Cornell Law School, and I taught at another law school, Lincoln Law School here in San Jose. So my background is interdisciplinary as well. So I identify with William James. So did you have any initial questions before we dive into the quotes?
Well, one of the things I was wondering, I did get the book.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and I've just started reading it.
Can you see it?
Oh, yeah, well, that I see. Yeah, no, I just got the varieties of
Oh, you got that book. I
yeah.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one thing I was wondering was if he was married.
I don't see any references to his wife anywhere.
Uh-huh.
And I read a bit about him, but I
Yeah.
don't see.
Well, it's not that important. It's just that it seems that he also struggled physically. Didn't he have health issues earlier in his life? I seem to have read something about that.
Yeah, I seem to recall reading something about asthma, but I had asthma as a child myself. My mother was a smoker back in, I'm a 1958 model, like the Edsel. And back in 1958, that was before the Surgeon General's warning, which I think came out around 1964. So my mother smoked during her pregnancy with me. Yeah, and so and smoked around the home. So I got the good dose of secondhand smoke. So I had childhood asthma, but I had my lungs x-rayed one time because I had pneumonia, and they had to bring out another machine. They said my lungs were too big to x-ray on the first machine.
Oh my goodness.
Wheeled out. So maybe it helped me develop really big lungs, which might come in handy if I get COVID or something. I haven't had COVID yet, so let's hope I don't. So yeah, I don't know about the health issues, and I also don't remember reading anything about his children, which in his day, of course, you don't need to be married to have children, but in his day, I think it was more expected than it is today, when we have major rock stars and public personages having kids outside of wedlock willy-nilly. So
okay, I was wondering, from the point of view of time and energy, is the way I was viewing. I know women had well, anyway, I was just thinking in terms of relationship, if he had a wife, but that was from the point of view of time and energy. That's the way I was looking at it.
You mean he would have more time for scholarly pursuits if he didn't have to?
If he was single, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could be. I know he had pretty strong family relations with his brother, the famous novelist Henry James. So there was a lot of letter writing and interaction with his brother.
Oh.
So he was a family man in that sense, that he was on speaking terms plus with his brother, at least. And fact, some people have suggested that William James is a better writer than Henry James, just in terms of writing style. But Portrait of a Lady is an underrated novel by Henry James.
Yes, and
It's kind of
there's
an
a,
action thriller, actually.
yeah,
You don't get from a lot of the classical. Of course, Moby Dick's kind of an action thriller, but a lot of the famous ones are kind of psychological melodramas or tragedies or something, but or comedies. But action, like James Bond type action, doesn't really factor in. Although, yeah, if you go back far enough, you can get all the Greek warrior tragedies and so forth. So anyway, I'll have to check in on that and get back to you about his family life.
sure.
But
Well,
I don't remember reading anything either.
the other thing I was wondering about, Sterling, is his sister. I don't think his sister had the oh yeah, that's great. Had the opportunity for education that her brothers did. And I think that she actually manifested illness as a result, some say as a result of that frustration of her own gifts. But we can put that to the side right now, because I really want to benefit from your teaching. But I was curious as to whether or not he was married or he was so focused, on, so.
If he was married too, back in those days, women died in childbirth much more often than they do today, and
Yes.
it's still a bit of a scandal how often they die even today. And of course, the life expectancies were not as great. He lived to age 68, which is pretty good for those days. Of course, he had
Yes.
the best medical care, I would assume, and he had a country home for some fresh air and getting away from it all. This is a biography of William James, which is bound to answer your question about whether he was married, and my question whether he had any kids. It's by Gay Wilson Allen, and it's
Gay Wilson Allen.
Yeah, Gay, Gay Wilson, the usual spelling, Allen, Allen.
Okay.
And it's a grand total of 556 pages with the index.
Wow.
I wonder if I look under W for wife, if I get lucky here. So, and I don't know her name to look up her name, but I would imagine in 556 pages, they'd get around to mentioning his wife if he had one. So, but I don't, and I haven't read this cover to cover. And they do like to publish his letters. In fact, there's a book of his letters that has come out. So you think he might write, and when he was in Edinburgh, I don't know if he took his wife with him, if he had a wife or not, but he might have written letters back. But let me look in the table of contents. Maybe they'll say the marriage of William James or something, and then that will answer that. Rebellions, grandchildren. It says the first chapter is, there's a chronology too. Let me look at the chronology, see if I can, and there are illustrations. See if they have an illustration of, Mrs. Henry James. Senior. That's Henry James Senior. William James at 18. Don't see a wife mentioned yet.
Okay.
Oh, Mrs. William James in the 1900s. That's an illustration. So apparently, yes, he was married. And they don't give a page number. They just list the illustration, but they don't tell me what page number to find it on. It says here, yeah. So, and then the chronology should have it then. Birth of a daughter. He had a daughter. That's in the chronology.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, in 1887, birth of daughter Margaret, Mary, Peggy. Birth of a third son. I assume they're talking about James, chronology of James. So he's got 3 sons and 1 daughter so far on the chronology. 1869, he received an MD degree at Harvard. And then he followed that up 4 years later with being an instructor in anatomy. They don't call him a professor. First course in psychology was 1875. Became an assistant professor. Oh, marries. He married in 1878 to Alice Howe.
1878.
Yeah, to Alice Howe, Howe, Gibbons. Double check that. Yeah, Gibbons.
Uh-huh.
July 10th. He also signed a contract for a book on psychology that year. Those are the two events for that year that are mentioned in the Quran. So he was married, and the birth of his son Henry was a year later, 1879. And then what happened to the second son here? Oh, birth of his second son. They don't pin it down. Oh, they do, 1882. And then 1884, he had a third son. Oh, and then one of his sons died. So I hope never to go through that. I hear it's just awful when you have a child die. And then birth of a daughter in 1887. So he's a family man.
Yes, I see that.
Second home in New Hampshire might come in handy because you could send them out there if you need to concentrate on your scholarship, or you could go out there. Birth of another son in 1890. So I don't know how I missed all these.
Wow.
His sister died in 1892. So this is a good biography, but I hadn't really absorbed the chronology. But you're right, you don't really hear much. And he is autobiographical in his scholarship to some degree. I would say to a substantial degree from what but yeah, I don't, but maybe he thought that was a matter of respect for his family, not to drag them into all this.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And Gay Wilson, what's Gay's last name for that?
Allen, Allen, like George
Okay.
Allen, the football coach. Can you see the book?
Yes, that's
Okay.
great. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it looks very thorough with 556 pages. And the index itself is, and her maiden name is Alice Howe Gibbons.
Uh-huh.
It's 11-page index, which is pretty good.
Wow.
I prided myself on a 16-page index for my 585 or so page business ethics textbook, but an 11-page index is pretty damn good. I kind of really like having big indexes. Nothing peeves me more than to see these big publishers put out these big books and even smaller books, and they have no index in them at all. But how many struggling grad students, Marita, would give their left arm to put that on their resume that they've done an index for Harvard University Press or some university press? It'd be a real feather in their cap, and it'd get them experience, and they'd have to read the book a bit. Of course. I thought every book you put out should have some sort of index. Of course, with an ebook, you don't need that because you can just do a Control F search, or you have a search box with an ebook. So my ebook doesn't have an index, but these days you don't need an index. But I remember a student one time said that my website was so long, I should have an index to it. I said, well, you can do Control F and search for any keyword you want. You make your own index just by using Control plus F. So in modern days, but when I was going to college and grad school before the internet really kicked in, I'd have all these books, and I just couldn't believe it that they wouldn't have an index to them when there are grad students, scratching at the window, Marita, trying to get experience and a few extra bucks to scrape by. And
of course,
these big publishers, they can't afford $100 or $50 for somebody to do it. Seems greedy to me, and it's a great service to the reader to have an index.
Oh, it is, absolutely.
So we're going to start a new movement today. That'll be on our agenda as well. Indexes for all.
Right.
Lower the unemployment rate even more. I think
I love it.
the new jobs record, new job statistics are supposed to come out today. They probably already come out.
I think they did. I think it's up to 500,000. I don't know. Jerry mentioned something this morning.
Uh-huh. I didn't click you. Oh, there you are, I think. There you are. So let's go full screen here.
Good.
And then, on my computer, I'm in black and white and I'm off center, but I guess am I properly centered?
Yes.
Oh,
It's
okay.
very well centered. Yeah.
Yeah, for some reason, I don't know if I dropped it on the floor or whatever, but so I can't really see myself. I don't really need to see myself in color. Hope you're not getting harshed out by that light in the background there.
No. You're
Okay,
quite
good.
clear. You're quite clear.
All right, well, and then my backup plan, when I looked at the number of quotes, there were quite a few from just the quotes from Varieties of Religious Experience from 1902, the 20 lectures that were published. I thought we could just kind of have a stream of consciousness, to use a William James term, and just to go back and forth, or have two of our consciousnesses merge into one bigger stream. And then, as Heraclitus, the dark one, the philosopher Heraclitus, said, you never step in the same river twice.
Right.
So at the end of the course, we can go back, and we don't have to do all of them, but
yes,
a few of the ones that really caught on with us, or that strike our fancy at the end of the course, and see if we feel the same way about the quotes. I guess it would be 4 weeks from now would be the fifth course.
That sounds great.
A month from now. So we have kind of a bracketing or framing of the course, and a before and after kind of thing, and see what there is to see with that. So, and then my backup plan, if we zoom through 90 quotes in 90 minutes or less or something, we shouldn't feel any need to do them all, but we should just see how it goes. And we should feel free to skip one, just say pass. I don't have any initial reaction to that. And we can come back to it. That's the beauty, right?
Yes,
is you can skip to the end and come back. In fact, we could go to chapter 20 and look at the quote, the way they've broken it up on WikiQuote. And I don't know if you can call it on your computer too, but and have a separate window. But I'll read it. I'll read the quote.
Okay.
Or you can you can be reading it with your eyes as I read it orally. So it's up to you. You can go to wikiquote.org, and then in the search box, search for William James. And I think there are something like hundreds of quotes for him. And the way I've been teaching more in recent years is to turn the courses into workshops for the term paper, because I really like the students to have a term paper at the end of the course that they can show their parents and show their supporters and say, can't say I didn't get anything out of this course because you got a term paper out of the course. And it does weed some students out who are just too disorganized to be able to write. So it does sort of that weeding out function that employers like. Don't send us a graduate who can't write a short paper. I usually make them evaluate 6 or more quotes. They have 16 weeks at Evergreen Valley College, and here we have 4 weeks, 5 classes, so we could scale it back to maybe a quote or 2 a week, so we could have like 4 to 6 quotes or so. And if the quotes are meaty enough, you don't need that many quotes. You think of Bible passages, you could think of four greatest Bible passages you can think of. You can spend your life sorting those out, right?
Right.
The Sermon on the Mount and 3 bonus selections or something. Or with Abe Lincoln, you do the Gettysburg Address and his 3 other biggest hits. You could spend a whole life trying to sort all that out. So much less filling up 16 weeks or or 4 weeks and 5 courses in 4 weeks. So let me, and we could skip to the end, do the conclusion, but I think we should just take them in order unless you have a preference.
No, that's fine. You know, Sterling, right now, I don't know how to get a second window, so I'm going to be listening to you, okay?
Okay, and then I'll repeat it if
Okay.
I like to
And then
say,
I will later go to this site.
yeah, I'll send you the link.
Good, thank
And
you.
after the course, I'll send that to you. Remind me if I forget, please.
Sure.
And then, yeah, I like to say repetition is one key to learning. Not that we're going to do rote learning or anything, but I think I read a since James is into psychology so heavily, I feel especially justified in saying I read a psychological study which said something remarkable, that we have to hear something up to 7 times before we really have it memorized very well, at least for your average person.
Mm-hmm.
There are these savants and so forth, children that can memorize a Mozart piece on the first listen. So, but for the average person, it's a different kettle of fish. So let me skip down here. I have a separate keyboard because I
Okay.
use my computer so much that I blew out 4 of the keys. They don't they don't work anymore. So I had to, for $12 and change on Amazon, I bought a separate keyboard.
Oh,
And I
uh-huh.
just plug it in and it works just fine. So it beats getting a new computer for $400 or something. So let me type in Varieties of Religious Experience, 1902. There it is. So, but I don't have the links. That's true. I have a Word file because I can manipulate the font size better. And so here we go. Oh, and then it's got a nice link. It says full text at the wiki source.
Yeah,
and
I
there's a
have
link.
the full text.
Yeah, and you can get it online anytime you want. If you're in the parking lot and you're waiting for
Okay.
parking lot to clear out, you can get on your phone and read the Varieties of Religious Experience. So there's a little link there. You just click on it and the whole thing will come up, and it's searchable and scrollable and everything.
Oh, all right.
Right there on wikisource.org. And there's a link to it on wikiquote.org. So here's the first one. And they put some of it in bold and then the rest of it not. So I'm not quite sure. This is from lecture 1
Okay.
of the 20 lectures that comprise the book, The Varieties of Religious Experience, 1902. And this lecture is called Religion and Neurology. So here we go. Right there, straddling religion and science. Neurology, of course, is a science, as you well know, since of your medical background. Do you have an MD?
No, I don't. No.
RN or what? I know you've been.
Well, I have a master's in health sciences. And I also was a practitioner, registered respiratory therapist. And I've studied, philosophy, a lot of theology, etc. So.
Yeah, well, I knew neurology is not going to be a tongue twister for you or anything.
No.
So, so all right, I'm just going to read through and then ask you to repeat. It's a rather long one. It's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines, but the part in bold is 1 sentence, and that's only 4 lines. So I'll probably pause after the first sentence and if you want to talk about that, and then I can give you the rest. And let's see, just to give you an idea, these are excellent lecture notes for me because it goes on and on and on. There are like dozens of these quotes from this one book. And then of course they have his other books with quotes too. And they have the date for context. And here's the quote: to plead the organic causation of a religious state of mind, then, in refutation of its claim to possess superior spiritual value is quite illogical and arbitrary, unless one have already worked out in advance some psychophysical theory connecting spiritual values in general with determinate sorts of physiological change. I'm definitely going to have to read that one again. He's packed a lot of ideas, but he's holding out two alternatives. And then he's got an unless complication there at the end. But he's following Strunk and White. Of course, he's writing before Strunk and White, but that's the Bible for good writing at Cornell, is William Strunk and E.B. White, who you may know from Charlotte's Web
Yeah,
fame. You probably read Charlotte's Web to a child or grandchild at some point.
yes, I have.
I have to a child, no grandchildren yet for me. Uh,
So what did you say as the standard of writing at Harvard? Did you say?
No, the standard of writing at Cornell, the Bible is Strunk and White. E.B. White was at Cornell, and then William Strunk came along later, I believe, and they put together this book called The Elements of Style. It's out in a 4th edition.
Yes, yes, I've seen.
Macmillan. I think it's around 2008 was some kind of celebratory centennial edition or something, like your 50-year edition or something of it. And but the 4th edition, I believe, is the most recent one, but there may be a later, like, celebratory 50th anniversary or something edition that came out, I think, in 2008, because I think I picked that up. I loan those out to students all the time. I don't always get them back, but that's okay. You can pick them up for usually $5 or less at a used bookstore.
Good.
Might be available online too. But the key chapter for good writing is chapter 2. And the particular point I was alluding to there is they say, put the emphatic point of your sentence at the end of the sentence.
Oh.
That's one of their rules. They also say put points positively, although they don't phrase it that way. That's my own spin. I'll email you my 26 guidelines for writing.
Would you? I'd really appreciate that.
Sure. It's A to Z 26 guidelines, and they overlap with Strunk and White. I have guideline S is to stay positive, put points positively. And I give lots of words that you can use instead of not or never. And there's a general prohibition against saying never anyway. I never say never, common sense aphorism. Because, why do you think people say never, Marita? It's a little Socratic dialogue going here.
Yes.
You've heard the phrase many times, I'm sure, probably since you were a child, never say never. But you ever wonder why do they say never? I think there's a good reason for it.
Well, discovery, of course, and the expansion of our understanding goes on throughout our life. So we're always learning, and as we age, there are nuances that we discover. So that's what comes to me in the moment.
So when somebody says never, how would that run afoul of the fact that we're always expanding our knowledge and we're learning deeper insights into what knowledge we had all along? How would that run afoul of that?
Yeah, it stops, it creates a barrier to, to ongoing understanding, even of another person. We can focus, I think we're all mysteries, and there's so much to a person that we only grasp over many, many years, as we grow and as we change. we perceive different things.
Right. So never would set an arbitrary limit. And then the way I put it is never is forever. You can quote me on that one. Never is just too damn long, Marita. When you say never, you're really committing to like an eternal ban. So never under any circumstances. There are a lot of different circumstances. Now, of course, you're going to get in trouble because people say, well, never again to the Holocaust. So of course you should say never to that. We never want to have that happen again. So it's like any kind of common sense aphorism. It seems to capture some kind of insight, but it's not a perfect formulation. Because if you said never say never, then you'd say, well, the Jews about the Shoah, the Holocaust, they should not say never again. And then you get in a big pile of trouble for trying to, you come across to some kind of Holocaust supporter or denier or revisionist or something. So we can say never, and we can say never will 2 + 2 equal anything but 4 in a log 10 mathematics system. Some things are true by definition. A vixen will always be a female fox, and a bachelor will always be an unmarried male. So you can say never will they be anything else other than those things. So you can get away with it in narrow frameworks. A hole in one will never be bested as a golf shot on a particular hole, because you need to have one shot in order for it to be a shot at all. So there are a few kind of narrow things or exceptional things where you can get away with saying never. But as a general rule, and of course, never say never violates itself. So it's kind of tongue in cheek. It should be always avoid saying never if you want to be true to the spirit. So it's got a bit of a tongue in cheek
Yes.
sass to it. So that's another one of the Strunk and White things. Put points positively. Be brief is another one of their rules, and use the active voice. I find this is really a lifesaver. So much of scholarly writing is in the passive voice. If you say the tree was hit by the ball, that's passive voice, but the ball hit the tree is 5 words. But the tree was hit by the ball is 7 words. Well, that's 2 extra words. And you say, well, Dr. Harwood, you're going to bother us about 2 extra words. I am, because that's 14%. In a 7-word sentence, if you can lop off 2 words, that's more than 14%. So imagine the favor you're doing your reader by giving them 14% less to read with the exact same content.
Yes.
They don't get tired. They understand you better. They don't get
right.
twisted around in a long sentence. So use the active voice. If you're writing a suspense novel, now that's a different kettle of fish, but for scholarly writing, but if you want to have suspense, and you want to keep hidden who's doing the acting, then you don't use the active voice.
I see. Yeah.
Then you could say, mistakes were made, or there was scratching at the window, instead of saying who did the scratching at the window and having an actor. You don't want to reveal who's doing the scratching at the window, because that's going to spoil the last act of the play or the mystery. So let me go over this one again here. So those are a few of the rules, and there really aren't that many. Oh, another one was put the modifier, like only, especially. I notice people misplace only. You have dangling modifiers. Put the modifier next to the word that it modifies. People put the word only too far up into the sentence usually, and it needs to go later in the sentence by and large, next to or close to the word that it modifies. So like the songs, I only have eyes for you. I only have eyes for you. I only have eyes for you. Ooh. So you got nothing else? That sounds kind of ghoulish. So it should be, I have eyes only for you, right?
Yes.
But it's a great song, but I don't know how it would sound with "I have eyes only for you," but I think they could probably work it out. Have a little different arrangement. But people tend to put the word "only" because "only" is such a powerful word. It tends to capture your imagination, your thought, and so it gets put down on paper more quickly than the rest of the sentence. But it should be "I have eyes only for you," and even there, it's supposed to be next to you, but it doesn't fit. You got to put "only for you," "only for you." Is be better, or it should be "for you only." That'll work, and then that puts the key word "only" at the end, which the Strunk and White also want. So that might even be better. So
Uh-huh.
I have eyes for you only. That might not be quite as big a hit as "I only have eyes for you." But so let me read this sentence. But that's a little bit about writing
Yes.
that I thought I'd introduce. So Strunk and White, The Elements of Style, William Strunk and E.B. White. The Elements of Style, it's the fourth edition, is the one I'm familiar with, although there could be some celebratory later edition that I seem to recall getting and giving away. And then chapter two. Chapter two is where you want to go. I don't say you have to skip the rest, but you can get by and become a much better writer just with chapter two. You'll be a better writer than most if you just follow chapter two, and then you'll probably be even better still if you could do the rest. There's another little book that has a lot of inspirational quotes called 10 Lessons on Clarity and Grace. I think it's by James Williams. And
10 lessons on clarity and grace.
yeah, 10 Lessons on Clarity and Grace by, I think it's James Williams. And I'll double check that and email you a link to it. And but that's not as good as Strunk and White, The Elements of Style, but it has a lot of quotes reinforcing and kind of exhorting you to greatness, and they do put the point in different ways from different. A lot of them are well known from different well-known writers, and so that's kind of inspirational, and it gives you different ways of formulating these rules, so you might be able to understand the writing rules a little better. Okay, so here's the first quote again. To plead the organic causation of a religious state of mind. So I guess if you were someone were inclined to argue or try to get you to believe that there's an organic cause for religious states of mind, religious thinking or religious experiences. So organic, I guess there was just a purely psychological, not a supernatural. If somebody says, well, religion is born out of the fact that we know that we're mortal. Most human beings know that they're mortal. And if we knew we were immortal or we didn't know one way or the other, then we wouldn't be religious. Every once in a while you hear an atheist especially argue that. They'll say, well, the only reason we have any religion at all is that we are going to die and we're afraid of it, or we're trying to cope with it or something. And if we were immortal and we knew we were immortal, nobody would bother to be religious. So some people make that kind of argument. So I guess that's the sort of thing he has in mind here. To plead the organic causation of a religious state of mind, then in refutation of its claim to possess superior spiritual value. In other words, the religious state of mind, usually, if not always, will say that there's something superior about it. It's not just something like a chemical imbalance in the brain or what you ate in the morning. Although I've been to Buddhist temples, my wife's Buddhist, and I kind of think of myself as some kind of rare blend, special blend, Marita, of Buddhism and Christianity. Try to take the best elements. I'm kind of a cafe. You've heard of a cafeteria Catholic, I'm sure, haven't you?
A Catholic what?
A cafeteria Catholic.
Yes. Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah, they pick and choose the
Yes,
doctrines that suit them the best. Well, I'm kind of a cafeteria thinker generally, and I just pick and choose from all different religions and philosophies and atheisms or whatever's out there, and try to cobble together some kind of philosophy that makes the most sense to me. Um, and that works in practice too. So he's contrasting this organic reductionism, really, of
Yes.
and remember the title of this is neurology, so that would be one kind of organic
Yes,
genetic
right.
neurology. So putting in that context, so you have this organic, neurological, biological, chemical source of religion, and Freud would probably be all about that, right? So Freud is always talking about the future of an illusion and civilization and discontents. Those are great books about why we're religious, and he's kind of bringing it down to the fear of death and maybe even a death wish at some point in Freud. So so there's a good paper topic for you. James versus Freud. Who's got the better of the argument on religion? James versus Freud. I think you'd side with James, not just knowing you a bit over the years here. So then refutation of its claim to possess superior spiritual value is quite illogical and arbitrary, unless, so here's the emphasized part, we have already worked out in advance. So he doesn't even think we should be having this religion versus science debate, or the origin of religion, whether it's organic or spiritual. We shouldn't even have that debate unless we've already worked out in advance some psychophysical theory connecting spiritual values in general with determinate sorts of physiological change. So that's a pretty tall order.
Yes.
Worked all that out in advance. So I don't know why he would. Well, here is his reasoning. The next sentence, you ready for the next sentence?
Yes.
Here's his reasoning. It's always nice when they have reasoning, isn't it? Not like Hegel or somebody, or Marx, it just comes down from on high, and you're never really quite sure what the argument for it's supposed to be. Otherwise, none of our thoughts and feelings, not even our scientific doctrines, not even our disbeliefs, could retain any value as revelations of the truth, for every one of them, without exception, flows from the state of their possessor's body at the time. So he's saying that if you don't work it out in advance, what the relationship is between mind and body, psychophysical theory, connecting spiritual values and physiological change. If you don't have that worked out, then you're not going to be able to get anything off the ground. It says here, you can't even get your scientific doctrines or your disbeliefs could retain any value as revelation of truth, because every one of them would flow from a state of your body if you don't work it out. So I don't know why that would have to be true, but I guess he's just kind of assuming that if you don't work out what the relationship is, the only thing you're sure about is the body. Remember, he's an empiricist. He thinks we should rely on our bodily senses. So unless you've worked out some kind of relationship between spirit and body, you're basically left with the body, but then you really can't get anything off the ground as a revelation of truth. It would just be like a bodily excrement or secretion. All your beliefs would just be bodily secretions or the equivalent. And how could you claim for them to be a revelation? I think that's my take on it initially. Pretty deep guy, huh?
Yes.
That's coming right out of the box. That's in lecture one. It's right out of the carton. You open it up and that jumps right out at you there. They don't give a page number here on WikiQuote, but it's lecture one. And you can do a keyword search on the electronic. You have a hard copy of the Varieties of Religious Experience, right?
Yes, but I can do a word search on the sources, right?
Yeah, you go to wiki source, so you do a control F, and then you can find out what paragraph it is, or if they have subsections, and then you can find out the first 3 or 4 words of the paragraph, and then you can scroll down your hard copy and find it there. And I always mark up my hard copies.
Yes.
Well, the other
Yeah.
book I have handy today, just to uh, so see it here, and I've shown you the other two, the Gay Wilson Allen biography.
Right.
I'll hold
Yes.
it like Trump held the Bible there. Never seen anybody hold the Bible like that. But and then when he was clearing protesters out,
That was unreal.
using the armed forces. And you saw this one. This is the one I actually wanted to assign for the course if we got up and running, just because it's so cheap, but you can't get cheaper than free online. So, but this has got a commentary by a very good philosopher named John J. McDermott. And, and he also wrote the introduction to this, the works of William James. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, so this is the writings of William James?
Yeah, and I don't know how many volumes it is. It could be like 40 volumes for all I know, but I picked up one of them, and the works of William James, and this is the one called Essays on Religion and Morality.
Morality,
Yeah, so that's religion and morality is what I wanted to focus on. I mean, no slight to psychology and science, but I thought religion and morality, those essays would be especially interesting to me. And because I do legal, moral.
What is the essay again on morality?
It's a whole book, and it's collecting together.
Yes.
Essays. Essays plural on religion and morality. And I don't know that it gets them all, but it gets a lot of them. And it's from 1982, back when I was in law school, in the middle of law school. And I think I got it from the philosophy department. They used to put books out on the table.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've even marked it up in pencil. I kind of mark up my books.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
Because I always think, well, if I can get one or two things out of that book, and by marking it up, I can find it again without having to reread the whole book. I can just look in the margins and find the point.
Right.
And then just page after page, I do that.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I'll put a Q if there's a question I like. I'll put a Q. And then if it's a quotable passage, I'll put a Q and then circle it. I have my little code things to myself. So I encourage students to mark up the book. This book has an enormous index. So, oh, not enormous, actually. It's got that concordance or something, but it's got an index. So Harvard University Press put it out. And since he's a Harvard man, I would expect them to have done a good job. I haven't read the whole thing cover to cover. It's got 9-page index, looks like, for a book of, yeah, I like to be able to look up like everything he says about Descartes or something. And I can read it all in one go. You know, I can look under Descartes and say, oh, he's got 7 entries for Descartes. Let's read them all back to back to back. And what I'm doing in class is more, it's pages are at the bottom here. 345 pages long, 345, that's easy to remember. The other one was 556. That was pretty easy to remember too. 555 plus 1. That was the Gay Wilson Allen biography. And then it's a monster. This other book I have is over 1,000 pages, or it's close to 1,000 pages. This other book with McDermott. Oh, McDermott does the introduction to the Harvard thing too. The Harvard collection of essays. 858 pages. This one is. So.
Wow.
That I can remember because 8, I guess that's my favorite number. It's very big, lucky number in Asian societies. 7 is the big lucky number like James Bond 007 in Western societies. And then 58 I can remember because I was born in 1958. If I stop remembering when I'm born, Marita, let me know, okay? So might be time to take a break. So, oh yeah, by the way, if you want to take a break anytime, just let me know.
No, that's fine. I'm interested in these quotes and, you know, your approach on this, you know,
if you need to
looking
take,
at the quotes before and after, um, a certain amount of study and discussion.
yeah, we might after the class, it might be too distracting to write things down now, but if you have a pad next to you, you could maybe write a few keywords or something or thoughts that occur to you. But if you, when it's fresh in your mind right after class, you might go back to the quote and just type up like agree or disagree. I try to get my students to agree, disagree, or partly agree with as many quotes as they can on a particular subject. And I have 125 different approved subjects in my critical thinking logic course. So they have a lot of room to maneuver. And and I find that having the classes be workshops where you write down what you think, and those are 80-minute courses. We have 90 minutes here, but we could take a time if you wanted to jot something down. I can pause for a minute, and we could always edit that out of the recording, so people don't have to sit through a pause when they're playing it back. Presumably that could be edited out. But if you needed a break just to write down your initial reaction to this thing, you could do it now while it's fresh in your mind, or you could do it right after the class is over. But 90 minutes, we might go through so many quotes that it might be hard.
Yeah. No, I am jotting it down.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to hold off jotting it down for now, but I might run and get a pen, and I have a pen right here. I might jot something down in one of these books here to see. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good quote to start. Pretty deep, but he seems a little restrictive. But I guess where he's coming, he's an empiricist, so he relies on the bodily senses as our sources for knowledge. And so if you don't have it worked out in advance what the spiritual values relationship is to physiological changes, it reminds me of is Saint Teresa of Avila.
Mhm.
Avila. You pronounce the L Avila. I believe you pronounce
I
the
think
L
so. Yeah, I think,
hard. If it were two L's, you could say Avila, but it's one L. So Saint Teresa of Avila, she used to starve herself and put her head between her legs to get blood to rush to her head, and there would be no blood in her stomach because she didn't eat anything. And so she got these ecstasies. And Bernini is one of my favorite sculptures. Bernini's Saint Teresa in Ecstasy, I believe.
yes, I've seen that. Yeah.
It's gorgeous, absolutely beautiful, and in white marble. And Bernini's probably my favorite sculptor. And so there's a good study for the physiological interacting. So if we could just bring her back in the time machine, we could grill her about her physiological changes and her spiritual values or spiritual experiences, and map them out somehow, like what happened when you had some tartar sauce, or what happened when you had some corn or something. So or what happened when you had nothing, is and she does write about it, so we might just be able to search her writings. So that might be a good project too. So Freud versus William James, trying to apply this quote to Saint Teresa of Avila. That'd be kind of fun. And maybe they could all be combined in one big extravaganza. So and so I remember an interview with David Bowie, the rock and roller. Have you heard of him?
Yes, sure.
They asked him, how did he write songs? Because the songs seemed to be so cryptic, and they're very mysterious sometimes. And he said he would have these phrases that would occur to him, and sometimes on drugs, sometimes not, sometimes in conversation. He'd write them down on little scraps of paper, and then he'd cut them out and he'd put them in a hat. and he'd jumble them all up in a hat, and he'd pull them out, and he would juxtapose them. And he wouldn't just put them in whatever order they came in out of the hat. He would use his judgment as to whether they fit together in a provocative way or not. And he would just do that. And he'd save up these big hatfuls or, shoebox fulls of phrases, and then he'd try to string them together. So in my early days in philosophy, I used to be much more of the mind that we should try to be systematic about our philosophy and proceed from first principles. That's sort of what James seems to be saying here. We got to sort everything out in advance and have a first principle. And I would read Immanuel Kant, and I'd read John Rawls with these 500-page books, and all proceeding from these first principles. But if you don't like the first principles, you're kind of wasting you're kind of wasting your time in a hurry there. So now I had an audiobook of Blaise Pascal's Pensées, Thoughts, and there are 924 sections, and they're kind of they go on little stretches where they're related to each other, but they're largely unrelated to each other. I mean, he has themes and he has general concerns. So I listened to that. When I would go to bed for a few days, I'd go to bed listening to Pascal's Pensées on YouTube. I have YouTube Premium, and they'll play the audiobook for you right there, and you can fall asleep with Pascal's Pensées. And those fragments are very provocative, and you can juxtapose it. You could take fragment number 4 or thought number 4, and then compare it with thought number 924, which is the last one. He had 924. And then I used to think very little of Ludwig Wittgenstein, the philosopher, who has a Cornell connection. He visited Cornell to work with Norman Malcolm and Max Black, both of whom I met. I did not meet Wittgenstein. He died, I think, in the 1951 or so. I'm a 1958 model, so we missed each other. But he left an impression at Cornell. And I used to not think very much of him, even though he had that Cornell connection. And I'm kind of loyal to my school and its traditions. And the first publication I ever had was in a Wittgensteinian journal. My article was Taking Skepticism Seriously and in Context. And it was published in Philosophical Investigations in July of 1989. It's a Welsh journal run by D.Z. Phillips, who was a Wittgensteinian. Of course, it has the same name as the book by Wittgenstein, Philosophical Investigations. So I had kind of a Wittgensteinian connection, although I really didn't think he was. I was arguing based on G.E. Moore, but it had implications for Wittgenstein. But I didn't really like Wittgenstein early on because he just had these fragments a lot, and it looked like he was being systematic because he had 1.18 and stuff. He had like a Spinozoan. Spinoza did that sort of a geometrical numbered system. So in one sense, it looked systematic, but it was really a bunch of fragments, and you had to kind of unpack them yourself. But now, with doing this teaching, where the students focus on quotes, because I think bite-sized quotes or manageable quotes, I think, are good for the community college students and the other students that I have. It's just too much for them to try to read a 500-page book in 16 weeks or something. It's better to just keep going at it in class, with particular quotes. And of course, you can juxtapose and build on the quotes. And you could have eventually 500 pages worth of quotes if you wanted to. But it seems to be a more manageable project. And the David Bowie point I was making is that the juxtaposition of quotes is very fertile ground, where it's just reading the same author for hundreds of pages, working out his own or her own system. It seems to be more sterile, not as fertile as could be quotes from the same author, could be quotes from different authors. So there's more variety. Variety is the spice of life, and we get the varieties of religious experience. So So now I'm kind of inclined to, I want to go get Soren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher. He's got a book called Fragments, Philosophical Fragments. And of course, Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, there's nothing Nietzsche couldn't teach you, Marita. So I like to say there's nothing Nietzsche couldn't teach you. So he lived 1844 to 1900, although he was insane from syphilis the last 11 years of his life. So he stopped writing. But his sister, who was some kind of fascist, racist, she used to trot him out, bring him downstairs. He was in a white robe, and she would bring him down to visit with visitors to the house. There, she took care of him, and she kind of manipulated some of his works to make it look like a proto-Nazi. Of course, he's writing before the Nazis rose to power in 1933. He died in 1900, but some people try to cast him as like a precursor to the Nazis. And there's actually a documentary film by a guy named Hicks, which is pretty good, called Nietzsche and the Nazis. It's out on DVD too, but I think it's on YouTube as well, YouTube Premium anyway. So I think this juxtaposition that David Bowie worked for him in his writing rock and roll lyrics, but I like juxtaposition more and more because it's not as limited as just sticking with one author, and then if you pick the bad author, or the author is good but he's got a bad first principle that he's trying to work out, see, then you could get into a big wastage of time in a hurry there. So any other thoughts on this first quote?
I don't think so. I think we've done two, right?
No, well, it's been two sentences of the same quote.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the other one was the reasoning for the first quote.
Yeah,
It says, otherwise, none of our thoughts and feelings, not even our scientific doctrines, not even our disbeliefs, and he emphasizes DIS, or disbeliefs, could retain any value as revelations of the truth, for every one of them, without exception, flows from the state of their possessor's body at the time. And they would be at the time. That's another, he puts the important thing at the end. So how could they, see, if you think of truth as something that's longer lasting than what's in the moment, truth is some sort of more fundamental than that. It's not just a transient, ephemeral point. Then I think you may be onto something, and that's the way he's thinking of it. It would just be like a bodily state, like I feel hungry or something, and that affects your. And people have been trying to do this more and more with. They do it with judges. It's called psychometrics with judges, and they try to determine when they write an opinion or announce an opinion in the morning, are they more lenient than when they announce it in the afternoon?
Oh.
If they haven't had lunch yet, are they more severe? So then you can try to change your sentencing hearing to the afternoon after the judge has had lunch and he's a little, or she's a little sleepy and maybe wants to get out on the golf course. So she doesn't want to argue for a stricter punishment. She'll just give you something light. But in the morning, they got all day to argue about how hard to punish you. So people are doing like psychometrics and trying to see whether you're physiological. And they're doing it with Supreme Court justices now too. Are there certain times of the year where maybe they get depressed because the sunlight in Washington, D.C. is not too great, or when the cherry blossoms are in bloom and they have to drive and they get to drive by the cherry blossoms that the Japanese were kind enough to give us. I think that was after World War II. So they're very beautiful. So there were two sentences in the quote, and the second sentence I read again there was meant to be the reasoning for the first, that if you don't work out the spiritual and the physiological in advance, then all you're left with, from his empiricist point of view, relying on the bodily senses for the source of knowledge, all you're left with are bodily states, and then you can't even really claim to have any truth at all for your, not even for your science or your disbeliefs or anything, because it's all a matter of ephemeral bodily states. So then you're left with nothing. Now, in the Buddhist tradition, like Zen, be here and now, be in the moment. They might not be afraid of that. They might say, well, the only truth we have is in the moment. Although they're always talking about the Buddha. Many over 483 or so BC, so 2,500 years ago or so. So, and they have the Pali Canon and the scriptures, the Diamond Sutra, Deer Park Sermon, and so forth. So they have things written down, and so they're not in the moment to the point where it's all an oral tradition that you just memorize the way some Native American Indian tribe. I think the last of the code breakers from the Navajo died recently. Made me remember the oral tradition of the Navajo. So if you have an oral tradition that's based on your memory, and your memory can change based on physiological conditions, age can affect your memory, obviously, and whether you're distracted can affect your memory. Whether your memory is jogged by some event that's similar to what you're trying to remember, that could affect it. So, so some people might not be as afraid as James seems to be here of reducing it all to a temporary bodily state. If you're comfortable with an oral tradition and relying on memory, and you trust the elders who've memorized the traditions, or if you're a Zen Buddhist monk and you want to be here now, live in the moment, like it's a famous question that the Zen masters ask. They say, well, what's your favorite place? And you know what your answer is supposed to be if you've learned your lesson from the Zen master? What's your favorite place? There's a correct answer to that. You want to guess?
In the moment? I don't know.
It's right here. Right here is my favorite place, because that's where I am right now. So you're supposed to be in the moment, and you're supposed to be in the present place, in the present time. So when the Zen master asks you what's your favorite place, you're not supposed to say Paris or Charing Cross Road in London, where all the bookstores are, or Hyde Park on Speaker's Corner on Sunday in London. You're not supposed to say, or the Eiffel Tower, or New York City and Madison Square Garden, or at the Knicks game or something. You're supposed to say right here. That's my favorite place. So some people are not afraid of that kind of commitment to the now, and some cultures, even in religions, don't seem to be afraid of it. But James seems to be a little afraid of that. He doesn't want everything to come down. Oh, and the Buddhists. I was at this temple I was saying earlier, and it struck me. I hadn't thought of it this way before, but they gave us a free lunch. Nice of them, vegetarian, of course, and they said we should think of food as medicine. And I hadn't really thought of it that way, but more and more as we're reading about the research that comes out about the benefits of different foods and the harms associated with other foods like starches and stuff, potatoes, or try to stay away from a starchy diet if you're a diabetic, or if you're just trying to lose weight or something. That, or fish, and having brain food, jellyfish pills, and fish being good for brain. The proteins are good for the brain, supposedly. Ask your doctor about all these things, but this is just stuff I read in the paper that might be true. And so that seems to be something that I can relate to more now that food is medicine. And of course, William James is all about medicine here, and having earned his MD and taught anatomy. But he doesn't seem to want the spiritual to be reducible to bodily states. So he wants it all worked out in advance before we really go there. But so that, to me, it seems like he might be dodging the issue or a little afraid of the issue. Why would you have to work it out all out in advance?
Uh-huh.
Why don't you learn by doing it? Sort of John Dewey, one of the four main people that the Stanford Encyclopedia says were influenced by William James. Wittgenstein is one of them, and Bertrand Russell, who also influenced Wittgenstein, and John Dewey is another, and then Edmund Husserl. That's sort of your Mount Rushmore, all white males. I'm terribly afraid to report, and of course James is a white male, but so that's your Mount Rushmore of four big figures influenced by William James. You got Russell, Dewey, Wittgenstein, and Husserl.
And how do you spell the last name? I'm not familiar with that.
Oh yeah, Edmund Husserl, Husserl.
Husserl.
Yeah, Edmund Husserl. He's famous for phenomenology, and phenomenology is relevant here because they wanted to emphasize the ordinary, and Wittgenstein did too. He wanted to emphasize the ordinary, and I think I might be getting some of that from William James. If you're going to focus on ordinary bodily states and what kind of spiritual value you can associate with them scientifically or in some sort of empirical, reliable way, then we might be onto something here.
Well, I know it's some, in reading the first lecture, I think, or maybe it was another part of the book, he talks about, he says, he's talking about religious experience and where should we seek it? And he says, it need not then be sought for in the haunts of special erudition, but lie along the beaten highway.
There you go. That's a more ordinary path.
Yes, right. That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that supports this just notion I'm getting here. I don't have a firm hypothesis yet, but it seems like James influenced Wittgenstein and Dewey. See, Dewey is all about learning by doing, and you do it. That's how you learn it. So you don't have to get it all worked out in advance. You start doing it. Let's start having some physiological changes and monitor our spiritual values. Do we get more afraid of God if I eat chili, or or if I have fish on Friday? Do my brain food? Do I have more clarity after having fish on Friday, as the Catholics generally do, or? You know what that comes from? Why they decided for fish on Friday night fish fry?
No.
Yeah, it's an interesting why they, and there are a lot of dietary, the Jews have
right. Yes,
a lot of dietary, bodily, and of course, not engaging in sex before marriage or orgasms and all sorts of bodily functions and bodily states are either forbidden or required, or so it'd be interesting to kind of map some of those out and see if there could be any kind of reliable and then Saint Teresa of Avila I mentioned earlier, she was able to have these mystical experiences, and James is not afraid of mysticism. He's got a whole lecture or two on mysticism later in this book. And so that's one more intriguing thing about him too, because I get a lot of flack because in my classes, I I teach critical thinking. So one of the things that my students want to critically think about are these, kind of crazy beliefs about UFOs and abductions and New Age philosophies like The Secret. And if you believe something's good, like you believe a check's going to arrive in the mailbox, it's more likely to arrive in the mailbox or something. And most people just sort of blow those things off as like silly, wishful thinking. Freud would probably blow it off as wishful thinking. I think many of us would, but other people want to at least explore it.
Yes.
If there's some kind of psychic connection, or if you think positive thoughts, are you going to be better off than if you think negative thoughts? And when I practiced family law as a lawyer, one of the first things I did for my clients who seemed to be angry about the breakup, the dump E instead of the dump or is a technical legal term. Just kidding. I'd send them to anger management classes because a lot of times the judge might send them there anyway. But it turns out that if you anger has a reduction in your life expectancy, according to the studies that I've seen.
Yes.
I can't cite them chapter and verse right at this moment, but I think if we Google it and next week we could talk about it if it interests you. So, and living longer, you might think could have spiritual implications. Obviously, if you're thinking of your life as not your own, but as something you're devoting, like your body is really not your own. It's not really you. It's just something that you hold in trust. And that's why you should not defile your body. Your body is your temple to serve God in or with. And you could do God's work. And so therefore you should have a duty to avoid anger so you can live longer and provide more service. So you can make a religious argument for, dealing with bodily and mental states, but they seem to have bodily manifestations. Like there's something called the frustration anger response. So you get physically frustrated with something and then you get angry about it. So your bodily state might be, you're working out and you're trying to do 100 sit-ups or whatever it is. You're trying to lift 200-pound bench press or something, and you get frustrated, and then you get angry, and then you might lose your focus and drop a weight on your foot, and then you're out of business for a while. So there are these things that you could have spiritual values tied up to the physiological changes that you're trying. If you're trying to lose weight or build muscle or build endurance, get greater ability to hold your breath or have control over your breath. A lot of the religious experiences are about controlling your breath in Eastern religions. And then I think Saint Teresa also, she would place one finger over one nostril and then alternate back and forth in her breathing. So she would be oxygen deprived a little bit too, and starved, and put her head between her legs, and the blood would rush to her head, but the blood would not have as much oxygen in it.
Oh.
And she would try these various different procedures, as I recall. And I took a course on mysticism one time, and we studied her writings about her. So breathing and physiological changes, the amount of oxygen, or you could go the other way. You could get a mask of oxygen and see if breathing pure oxygen. You got to watch out for explosiveness, but see if that produces a different kind of spiritual sense. Okay, well, I think we've milked this first one pretty well. So you ready for another one?
Yes.
Oh, how are we doing on time? Do you have a counter on your recording there which says how long we've gone? I have it as 10:47. We started a bit after 9 because we had some technical glitches.
Right.
Because I clicked the wrong link. I clicked the PDF link instead of the Zoom link.
Well, I guess, let's see. I
Well,
guess we could go till 11. Do you think?
yeah, we could wrap up in about 13 minutes, 15 minutes. It doesn't have to
Okay.
be, I don't know how strict you are about the
I'm
90
not. I'm
minutes.
not strict.
So
No,
yeah, if you've got to run off and to an appointment or something. So
no.
yeah, why don't we put about 15 more minutes into it and knock off about 11 o'clock.
Okay.
And then the counter doesn't say how long we've been recording.
Oh,
Well, that's okay. If it doesn't display it, then don't start pushing buttons because we may get disconnected or something.
yeah.
So, but we'll see it after the fact. And if I shorted you a few minutes,
All right.
we can have a
Okay.
supplementary recording next week where I'll record a little short intro, just wrapping up something what we learned last week.
Okay. Good. All right.
Previously on the varieties of religious experience. We
Good.
have a little reminder about what happened last week. Okay, the second quote is even longer. The first sentence is the one that's highlighted in bold. It's 5 lines, four lines in a word. And then he's got a follow-up sentence, which is almost 4 lines. It's from
Okay.
the same lecture, Religion and Neurology. What's that? Did you say something?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. Here's the quote. There are moments of sentimental and mystical experience that carry an enormous sense of inner authority and illumination with them when they come. Oh, it's actually 2 sentences in bold. That's the first sentence. Let me read that. Let's take it one sentence at a time. There are moments of sentimental and mystical experience that carry an enormous sense of inner authority and illumination with them when they come. Now, so we don't know if he's talking about himself or other people that he's been talking to or reading about. So why don't we go on to stop me if I'm going too fast. So the next sentence is, but they come seldom, and they do not come to everyone, and the rest of life makes either no connection with them or tends to contradict them more than it confirms them. That's interesting that he would.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Rita, you're
Mm-hmm.
past your time to see them.
Yes.
Okay, well, we can kind of just ponder that last quote there and wrap it up right here. Since it sounds like you said your past time. It's
Oh,
11,
Jerry said that. Yeah, that's all right.
it's 10:50. You want to continue or you want
Yeah, let's go till 11.
Oh, okay, very well. I just heard something in the back that you may be missing a time or something. So that's interesting that he would want to say that the experience contradicts these rare experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I would agree with him that they come seldom. They don't come to me at all, really. I did have a weird experience one time. If you don't mind me digressing. I was in a bookstore, as I tend to be, and it was Walden Books. Remember Walden Books?
Yes.
And kind of a commercialized, that's when people could actually sell a lot of books, and they had chain stores of, but now they've had Barnes and Noble and Borders bookstore close up so many stores with Amazon online, but it is damn convenient. Just get on Amazon and read ebooks and order your books delivered to your doorstep. But I went in, this is in, I think it was in San Jose. They had a little underground promenade, and down in there was Walden Books. And so I went down the steps and into the store, and they had philosophy, and then the section next to it was occult. And then they had religion. So they had philosophy, occult, religion. And so every once in a while, I'd stray from the philosophy to look at the occult and the religion. But I was mainly looking at the philosophy one. There's this other guy looking at the occult and religion sections, bookshelves side by side there, built into the wall. And I heard this buzzing sound, and it felt like it was right above my head, and like it was an insect, like a bumblebee or something. And then it went away, and then came back, and I couldn't see anything. I looked around, and I swatted. I didn't feel anything being hit by my hand when I swatted, and it came back louder, and then it went away, and then it came back even louder. And I had the impression I could feel the vibrations in my upper right part of my forehead, near the hairline in the upper right part of my forehead. And the fellow was standing on my right. And I asked him, I said, "Did you see any insect or something flying around?" And he said, "Power of suggestion." And then he walked away. So now there are some people who can throw their voices, I've heard. And so I'm wondering if that guy was like playing tricks on me, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and he was throwing his voice to make like a vibrating sound. And then it
Mhm.
was the power of suggestion that I interpreted it to be an insect or like a bumblebee or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that counts as a mystical experience, but it's damn weird, damn peculiar. So I've had a few things like that, but nothing like Saint Teresa or anything. Did you have any experience you wanted to share that was offbeat or kind of uncanny?
Well, I'm just trying to remember. I do remember I journal a lot, and I try, and journaling for me is leads me to a spiritual experience. In other words, I don't try and impose my mind on what I'm going to write, but it's more a psycho-spiritual experience. And I remember one time, and I'm going to say it was 20 years ago, when I was on the train coming home from work, and it was Easter week, and I had been reflecting on the Easter scriptures and, what Easter meant at this time to me. And I was on the train has, I used to take the train to and from work, and on the lower, in the same car, you have double seats on the main level, and then you can walk up like a half flight of stairs, and there are single seats up above with windows. And I used to like to sit in a single seat so that I wasn't distracted by the person next to me, or, somehow feeling their energy. And I remember this one time writing, and it came to me, and I can say an insight. It was an experience, it was like another level of what Easter meant to me at that time. And then it was only a 30-minute ride, and because it was an express train, and I got to the end of the station, and, Jerry met me, and my mind went in a different level. But I then lost the book, that journal.
Oh,
And I really regretted it, because I could never recapture what had come to me. So I don't know if that's what he's talking about. I'm not, and I don't know what qualifies as mysticism or any of that, but I'm just saying that at times when I'm focused on writing in my journal, it's almost as though the pen touches my soul when I touch the paper. And it's not that it's writing without me, but it's writing in a spiritual state of mind that is not controlled by my rational mind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I'm clear what I've said.
No, you are. And you somehow captured the spirit of Easter in your thinking, and then you had it written down and you were pleased with it. Did you lose the book right then that day, or
no,
was it later?
no, it was later,
Oh,
but,
okay.
but I used to write all the time. And
Oh.
so at some point I wanted to go back to it and I couldn't.
Right.
Because I knew in retrospect that that was a special moment, that something came to me. Something came to me in that moment. I
Right.
didn't think of it as being mystical exactly, but it was in the spiritual realm, and it was new. It enlightened me in a way, or broadened, elevated me in a way that I don't know if elevated is the right word here. It was focused. But I would say it enlightened me about something. And I don't know how to use words to distinguish here.
Well, if it wasn't mystical, at least it was meaningful.
It was very meaningful.
When you say capture the spirit of Easter, I don't have one thought about it. I mean, there's Good Friday, and then there's the resurrection on Sunday. So I put two different spins or takes on the whole Easter weekend, but Easter Sunday has got one set of connotations for me, but Good Friday, I consider that part of Easter in a sense too. I mean, it's Good Friday, but I kind of associate it with Easter. So which Easter was it? Easter Sunday that you had in mind when you say like the spirit?
Well, let me. It's broader than kind of Easter, but it was Easter Sunday. But there's another point here, and he uses the word sentimental.
Right.
And I want to relate that. Oh dear, it's 11 o'clock. Is it all right to just?
Sure. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
what's important, one of the aspects of the crucifixion and what followed, the burial and Easter, that's important to me. I mean, I should say that I identify with, that I can delve deeper into, is Mary Magdalene. And Mary Magdalene was at the foot of the cross with Jesus's mother.
Washing his feet, as I recall.
Well, when he was on the cross, she wasn't washing his feet.
Oh,
but so she identifies with Christ.
Right.
I mean, there was an opera. There is an opera which I saw on Mary Magdalene and Jesus at the San Francisco Opera House, and where they are very close, whether you call them lovers but they are intimately involved with each other, in the sense of she understands things that his disciples don't understand and such. And so then Mary goes to, she suffers with Christ, he dies, she goes with Joseph of Arimathea and others to bury Christ. And then it's the Sabbath, so something about the Sabbath. So anyway, she goes to her home, and then the next morning she comes with other women to anoint the dead body of Jesus. And there, Jesus's body is gone.
Right.
And and so she's very distraught. and she doesn't know who's taken his body. She doesn't know about the resurrection. So then Jesus appears to her in the garden. And so
She's the first person to see the risen Christ.
she is, Sterling. And
She
so,
wants to embrace him, and he says no.
right. Don't touch me. Yes.
It wasn't as if he's not fully formed yet. He says no, and doesn't want to embrace at that point, as I recall the story.
Right. So, so this whole experience is like one big moment for me.
Mhm.
And
Sentimental.
absolutely, there is the sentimental aspect to it.
Mhm.
And of course, there's the Gospel of Mary Magdalene also.
Right. Yeah.
It goes on to talk about how Jesus revealed certain things to her that the disciples did not know, and the kind of antagonism they have about that. But I'm just painting this big picture. So it is in that big moment that I reflect. And so it's that, you know, I mean, when you say a big moment, there's many levels to it.
Right.
And I had somehow come upon another level when I was doing that writing. The writing is a way of making me present when I get, you know, when I leave my kind of rational control. I'm not analyzing it rationally. I'm opening to an experience, an insight, whatever you want to call it, you know.
Maybe it was an imagination. You could imagine the scene more clearly, or you could identify with Mary Magdalene more clearly in that moment. There was a sentimental attachment to her through identifying with her and just imagining the scene. If you have all your distractions, you're in your single seat on the train, all the distractions are gone. So you can imagine better maybe in that circumstance.
Well, there's another element too that that I think James is bringing out in these lectures, and that is he talks about the fact that spiritual experience is work, and the work is about changing us so that we manifest somehow in a new way, you know. I mean, we're more compassionate, or we are or our faith is stronger so that we're braver in the world, or we're more zealous. And so I think he's pragmatic in that way, that spiritual experience has to, it's work. He calls it work that changes us. And that has to, and we only know it happens because of what the effects of it in our lives.
Well, by its fruits you shall
yes,
and then also faith and works is a traditional distinction that many denominations make. Some denominations seem to think that faith is sufficient. Other denominations seem to think, no, you have to have faith and works.
Right.
I don't know anybody who just says just the works will do the trick. So
right.
Faith and works.
But you can see if someone is kind, or if someone goes out of their way for someone else. You can see that.
Right.
And so what I'm talking about is really a combination. It's somehow there was light involved, in the sense, not in light streaming into me, but in the sense of understanding. I understood something.
Illumination.
Yeah, it was a kind of illumination. And it was important to me because it strengthens my faith. I mean, I that's what I would say. That's all I can say.
So you're writing, would it be like, would you writing more blow by blow, like now I'm feeling light, or would it be this is a great experience. Would it be more abstract or detailed? Would your writing be in your
Oh,
journal?
no, it would be detailed. It would be what I was experiencing.
Blow by blow.
And
So
understanding, yes, yes,
specifics, yeah.
yeah, kind of go from, you know, what I'm experiencing and this means, or, you know, I mean, how I'm feeling it, or where it's leading me, or, you know, and
Would
it
it be like a
even could
dream
be-
with vivid colors, and you would describe the colors or how vivid they were or which colors they
Yes,
were,
yeah,
or something like
yeah. But,
like a daydream, or what they call a waking dream.
yes. So it's like a painting that has more detail in it, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, I realize I'm taking us over time, but
Well, that's okay.
it does have that. It was interesting to me that he used that word sentimental in what
Yeah.
you just read.
Uh-huh.
And I want to read it again. And
Yeah, we'll look at these quotes, and you can pick, instead of us going in order next week, now that you know what I'm out when I'm on about here, you can pick out a few quotes, and if you want to email them to me so I can ponder them ahead of time, or you
yes,
can just get me
yes,
fresh
I
and
will.
get
I
my
will.
fresh, unadorned take on them. Either way you want to do it, or you can go halvesies. You do half and half. You could send me a few to ponder, and then you could surprise me with a few. You could do that too. I don't mind being surprised. So why don't we do some more quotes? I think we got a lot out of these quotes this
We
week.
did. We definitely did.
Great. I'm glad to hear it. Okay, Marita, I'm going to email you those follow-up, these books and so forth, and the
Yes,
and the
great.
websites that I mentioned, just so
Yes,
you'll have
please.
them.
That would
Probably
be
within the
great.
hour, but I may take a short break, and then
Oh, yeah.
but
No,
look for
no
those in your
rush.
emails. Certainly way before next week, you'll have
Great,
these
great.
emails from me with these links and sites and things.
Wonderful.
Oh, well, thanks for a
This
great
was
first
really
pass.
interesting
Well, I'm
and
glad to hear it.
enjoyable.
Yeah, I enjoyed it very much, and enjoyable and enlightening. Good to see you. Give my best to Jerry.
I will.
Okay,
Thanks a lot.
bye-bye. All right,
Okay,
you're welcome.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.